There is a small train station in a quiet coastal town that most people pass through without ever really seeing. It's not famous. No landmark plaques. No grand architecture. Just a couple of benches, an old clock that runs a little slow, and a steady rhythm of arrivals and departures that blur together over time. But every year, on Valentines Day, something happens there that makes people stop. An old woman shows up early in the morning. Hair silver white, posture a little bent, lipstick carefully applied like she's getting ready for a first date. She stands near the exit gate, smoothing the front of her coat, eyes fixed on the platform like she's expecting someone she's known her whole life. Because she is. And she's been waiting for him for 66 years. Most folks don't notice her the first time. They're rushing. Latte for work. Latte for love. Latte for something. But if you come back year after year, you start to realize she's always there. Same day. Same place. Same quiet hope sitting behind her eyes. Her name, for the sake of this story, was Eleanor Brooks. And if you ever asked her why she came, she would smile gently, like the answer was obvious, and say, "My husband promised me they'd come back today." People would nod, unsure what to say. Some thought it was sweet. Some thought it was sad. A few whispered words like denial or heartbreak. But Eleanor never corrected anyone. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She just waited. Long before her hair turned white, long before her hands began to shake when winter crept in, Eleanor was once a young woman who laughed too loudly and believed in ordinary miracles. She met him at that very station. Back then, her name was Ellie, and she hated being late for anything. She was 21, running down the platform one summer afternoon, dress sticking to her skin from the heat, when she collided straight into a man holding 2 cups of bad station coffee. Coffee flew everywhere. Apologized. She laughed. He laughed too, and for a moment neither of them moved. There was something about the way he looked at her, like he already knew her, like he'd been waiting for that exact moment to happen. His name was Thomas Hale. Everyone called him Tom. They talked while waiting for the next train, then talked some more when they missed it, then even more while walking nowhere in particular. By the end of the day, it felt like they had skipped past small talk and landed somewhere deeper, somewhere familiar. Love didn't arrive like fireworks for them. It arrived quietly, like it had always been there and finally decided to speak up. They learned each other in the simple ways. Morning routines. Favorite songs on the radio. How Tom always folded his sleeves the same way. How Ellie bit her lip when she was nervous and pretended she wasn't. A year later, they were married in a modest ceremony with borrowed chairs and a cake that leaned a little to one side. Eleanor later said it was the most beautiful cake she'd ever seen. They were happy in the way young couples are happy, unaware that happiness can be fragile not because it's weak, but because the world doesn't always leave it alone. Tom received his draft notice just weeks after the wedding. It arrived folded neatly, like the government didn't want to disturb the laugh inside the envelope. He read it quietly. Eleanor watched his face change before he said a word. They didn't cry right away. They sat together on the edge of the bed, hands intertwined, staring at the wall. Eventually Eleanor rested her head against his shoulder and said, "Okay." She was already pregnant. They didn't talk about that part much at first. Tom would place his hand gently over her belly, like he was memorizing something he was afraid he might forget. Eleanor would watch him do it, smiling even while her heart twisted. The night before he left, they barely slept. So many thoughts. So many what-ifs. So many things neither of them wanted to say out loud. At the station the next morning, everything felt louder than it should have. The announcements. The footsteps. The sound of the train pulling in, heavy and final. They held each other in the waiting room, bodies pressed together like they could somehow pause time if they held on tight enough. Tom kissed Eleanor's forehead, then her cheek, then finally her lips. Slow. Deliberate. Like he was imprinting the memory into both of them. "I'll be back," he said softly. "Next Valentines Day. I promise." She nodded. She believed him. Why wouldn't she? As the train began to move, Eleanor remembered the card she'd spent hours choosing, the Valentines card tucked inside her coat pocket. She ran alongside the train, heart pounding, shouting his name. Tom leaned out the window, arms stretched, fingers brushing hers just long enough to pass him the card. "Keep my heart safe," she called out, half laughing, half crying. "I will," he answered. "And I'll bring it back to you." Then he was gone. The first weeks were the hardest. The silence was heavy. Nights felt longer. Eleanor filled the quiet by writing letters. 2 a day. When full of love and everyday details. When full of fear she didn't want to burden him with. Before sealing each envelope, she pressed a red lipstick kiss into the corner. It became her ritual. Her promise. Months passed. Her belly grew. Letters arrived sporadically. Tom wrote about the heat, the exhaustion, the strange calm that settled in moments between chaos. He never complained. He never spoke about danger. When their son was born, Eleanor named him Samuel, after Tom's father. She held the baby and whispered, "Your dad's going to love you so much." Then the letters stopped. At first she told herself it was delays. Lost mail. What had a way of swallowing things whole. But as weeks turned into months, the fear settled deeper. The radio announced the war was nearing its end. Eleanor cried with relief. She imagined Tom stepping off the train, older, thinner maybe, but smiling. Then the telegram came. Missing in action. No body. No confirmation. Used absence. Eleanor clutched the paper with trembling hands, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. She refused to believe missing meant gone. And so, the following Valentine's Day, she went to the station. She wore her best dress. She held Sam close. She waited. Tom didn't come. The next year, she waited again. And again. Years stacked quietly on top of each other. Sam grew up. Eleanor worked. Life moved forward in all the ways it was supposed to, except for the part of her that stayed frozen on that platform. She never remarried. She never stopped believing. Because love, when it's real, doesn't always fade. Sometimes it waits. And every Valentine's Day, Eleanor Brooks returned to that station, lipstick freshly applied, eyes scanning the crowd, heart still listening for footsteps she had memorized decades ago, and that was how the town came to know her. The woman who waited. By the time Eleanor Brooks turned 86, the town no longer asked why she came to the station every Valentine's Day. They simply expected her. The station manager kept an eye on the clock those mornings, not because schedules mattered more on February 14th, but because Eleanor always arrived before the first train. Always. Even when it rained. Even when her knees swelled and the cold crept into her bones. She would arrive early, stand near the exit gate, and wait as if punctuality itself were an act of love. People brought her coffee sometimes. Teenagers whispered about her like she was a legend. Someone once joked that if love ever needed a spokesperson, Eleanor Brooks should be it. She laughed at that, but later, alone, she wondered if love really needed proof, or if it was enough just to keep showing up. Samuel had tried, gently, many times. "Mom," he would say, sitting across from her at the kitchen table, watching her hands tremble slightly as she poured tea, "You don't have to do this anymore." She would smile, the same soft smile she always used when she didn't intend to change her mind. "Yes, I do. But what if he's not coming?" She would look up then, eyes clear, voice steady. "Then I'll still be where I said I'd be." Samuel grew up carrying two truths at the same time. One, that his mother loved deeply and faithfully. Two, that love sometimes asks more than it gives back. It respected her choice, even when it hurt to watch her body age faster than her hope. It was Samuel's son, Daniel, who finally decided to do something. Daniel had grown up hearing the story. The train station. The promise. The wedding. To him, it didn't sound tragic. It sounded impossible. And impossible things, to Daniel, were challenges. He worked in media. Nothing glamorous. Mostly editing segments that people forgot 5 minutes after watching them. But he knew the power of a story when it was told the right way. And Eleanor's story, at once stayed with people. Daniel reached out to a local station. Then another. Eventually, a national network responded. They sent a journalist named Claire Morgan. Claire wasn't young, but she wasn't old either. She had learned how to listen more than she talked, which turned out to matter a lot. When she first knocked on Eleanor's door, she wasn't holding a microphone. Just a notebook and a quiet kind of respect. "I'm not here to make you a headline," Claire said. "I just want to hear your story." Eleanor hesitated. "I don't need people watching me wait," she replied gently. "I've been doing it just fine on my own." Claire nodded. "I understand. But sometimes, letting someone listen doesn't take anything away." Eleanor didn't answer right away. She studied Clyde's face, as if trying to decide whether this woman was there for the story, or for the truth behind it. Finally, she stepped aside. Come in. The house was modest. Clean. Full of light. And filled with photographs. Tom and Eleanor on their wedding day. Eleanor holding Sam as a baby. Sam standing awkwardly beside a bicycle. Then Daniel, then Daniel's children. Timmy lived on those walls, quietly proving that life had kept going even while one promise stayed unfinished. Clyde noticed something else too. On a shelf near the window sat a small, hand-carved wooden airplane. Old. Carefully preserved. Eleanor followed her gaze. He made that, she said. For our son. From scraps he found. Sent it in a letter. Clyde swallowed. Did he ever come back? Eleanor shook her head, but there was no bitterness in the motion. Not yet. The interview never happened. Not that day. Eleanor grew tired. Memories have weight, and carrying them for too long can pull a person under. Clyde packed up quietly and left, unsure if she would ever be invited back. But she couldn't let it go. Something about Eleanor stayed with her. The calm certainty. The way she spoke about Tom as if he might walk through the door any minute, apologizing for being late. Clyde began asking questions on her own. Military records. Old mission logs. Accident reports. Most of them ended the same way. Incomplete. Destroyed. Classified. Forgotten. Then, through a contact she almost didn't recall, Claire was given a name. Henry Caldwell. Former pilot. Sammy Unit. Sammy Year. Henry lived in a retirement home 3 states away. When Claire arrived, he was sitting by the window, staring at nothing in particular. When she mentioned Tom Hale, Henry closed his eyes. I was wondering when someone would ask, he said quietly. They talked for hours. Henry told her about the mission that never made it into official reports. About the crash deep in unfamiliar terrain. About how he and Tom survived when they weren't supposed to. He carried her picture everywhere, Henry said. Tucked inside his jacket. Wouldn't they let it get wet? Wouldn't they let it burn? Clyde asked the question she had been holding back. Did he make it out? Henry shook his head slowly. He stayed behind. It told her about the ambush. About the civilians caught in the crossfire. About Tom running toward danger without hesitation. He saved the child, Henry said. Told us to run. Silence filled the room. And his last words? Clyde asked. Henry's voice cracked. Tell Eleanor I tried. Clyde sat in her car for a long time afterward, hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. She didn't know how to bring this truth back to Eleanor. Or if she should. Sometimes answers don't heal. Sometimes they break things that have been holding a person together. She returned to Eleanor's house weeks later. Eleanor answered the door with a smile. You came back. I did, Claire said. May I come in? They sat at the kitchen table. Sunlight poured through the window, catching dust in the air. I need to ask you something, Claire said carefully. If you knew for certain, would you want to? Eleanor didn't hesitate. Yes. Clyde told her everything. The crash. The survival. The sacrifice. Eleanor listened without interrupting. She didn't cry. Not at first. Her hands rested flat on the table, fingers curled slightly inward. When Claire finished, Eleanor exhaled slowly. He kept his promise, Eleanor said. Claire blinked. What? He said he'd come back, Eleanor continued. He did. Used not the way we planned. Tears came then. Quiet ones. The kind that fall without shaking the body. I always knew, Eleanor whispered. I just needed the world to catch up. The military confirmed the findings weeks later. Official recognition. Honors. A burial site identified overseas. They offered to bring Tom home. The date they chose was February 14th. Valentine's Day. On that morning, Eleanor woke before sunrise. She dressed carefully. Chose her favorite lipstick. Looked at herself in the mirror and smiled. You kept me waiting, she said softly, as if Tom were standing right behind her. At the station, the crowd was larger than usual. Cameras. Reporters. Soldiers in dress uniform. Eleanor walked past them all. She stood where she always stood. The train didn't arrive. Instead, a procession did. They carried Tom home. Eleanor didn't collapse. She didn't scream. She stepped forward, steady and calm, and placed her hand gently on the flag-draped casket. "I'm here," she said. "Just like I promised." And for the first time in 66 years. She wasn't waiting anymore. The thing about closure is that it don't arrive with fireworks. It comes quietly, like a door finally closing somewhere deep inside your chest, the kind you didn't even realize had been left open for decades. For Eleanor Brooks, it came standing on the same platform she had stood on for most of her life, lipstick still fresh, coat buttoned carefully, hands steady despite the years. The station felt different that morning. Not louder. Not busier. Just, aware. People weren't rushing past anymore. They slowed. They watched. Some of them cried without fully understanding why. Others simply stood still, as if something sacred was unfolding and they didn't want to interrupt it. Eleanor didn't look at the cameras. She didn't look at the soldiers. She looked straight ahead, toward the tracks, like she always had. Only this time, she wasn't searching faces. She was remembering one. Later, when people asked her what it felt like in that moment, she said something simple. "It felt like exhaling after holding my breath my whole life." The burial was private. Just family. Just the people who mattered. No speeches that tried to summarize a love that refused to be summarized. No dramatic gestures. Just quiet respect. Samuel stood beside his mother, holding her hand like he had when he was a child crossing the street. Daniel stood behind them, suddenly aware that he had grown up inside a story much bigger than he ever understood. When the flag was folded and placed gently into Eleanor's hands, she didn't cry right away. She smiled. "Tom always hated attention," she said softly. This would have embarrassed him. That made a few people laugh through their tears. Grief, when it's mixed with love, does strange things. It hurts, but it also feels warm. Familiar. Like running your fingers over a scar you earned long ago. In the days that followed, something unexpected happened. Eleanor didn't retreat. She didn't close the curtains or stop answering the door. If anything, she opened up more than she ever had before. She told stories she had kept to herself for decades. Small ones. Funny ones. The way Tom used to sing off-key while shaving. The way he insisted he could fix anything, even when he very clearly could not. People listened. Neighbors. Journalists. Strangers who wrote letters saying they had never believed in love like that until now. Eleanor read every single one. Some nights, she sat at the same kitchen table where she had once written letters by candlelight, and she talked out loud, as if Tom were sitting across from her. "Well," she would say, pouring herself a cup of tea, "you finally made quite an entrance." She didn't go to the station the next Valentine's Day. Not because she was too tired. But because she didn't need to anymore. Instead, she woke up late, made pancakes for her great-grandchildren, and told them a story about a train station and a promise that lasted longer than most lifetimes. They listened wide-eyed, like children always do when they sense they're being handed something precious. As spring rolled into summer, Eleanor's health began to slow her down. Not in a frightening way. Just in the gentle, inevitable way time does when it knows it has done its work. One afternoon, Claire Morgan came to visit again. This time, she didn't bring a notebook. They sat on the porch, watching the light change. "You know," Claire said, "people still talk about you." Eleanor smiled. "I hope they don't turn me into a myth." He was just a woman who loved her husband. "That's kind of the definition of a myth," Claire replied gently. Eleanor laughed. "Well then, tell them this part too. Tell them I wasn't brave every day. Some days I was just stubborn. Some days I was scared. And some days I wanted to stop waiting but didn't know how." Claire nodded. "I will." Eleanor grew quiet for a moment, then added, "Waiting wasn't the point. Loving was." That sentence stayed with Claire long after she left. Eleanor Brooks passed away the following winter. Peacefully. In her sleep. On her nightstand sat a framed photograph of a young couple at a train station, smiling at a future they couldn't possibly predict. Beside it lay a small wooden airplane, its edges worn smooth by time and touch. At her memorial, the station manager came. So did strangers who had never met her but felt like they had. They spoke about promises. About paciencia. About the quiet courage it takes to keep loving when there are no guarantees. Someone asked Samuel if he thought his parents' love was tragic. He thought about it for a long moment. No, he said finally. It was complete. And maybe that's the part we miss sometimes. We think love stories are supposed to be measured by how neatly they end. By how many years two people get side by side, how symmetrical the timeline looks from the outside. But Eleanor and Tom's story didn't fit neatly. It stretched. It bent. It hurt. And still, it held. Their love survived distance, war, silence, and time itself. It lived in letters that never arrived on schedule. In rituals no one else understood. In a woman who showed up, year after year, not because she was certain, but because she chose to be faithful to hope. If there is anything this story leaves behind, it's not an instruction manual for how to wait 66 years. It's a reminder. That love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it sits quietly on a bench while the world rushes past. Sometimes it keeps a promise even when the ending changes. And sometimes, loving someone fully means accepting that you may never get the version of the ending you imagined, but choosing to love anyway. So if this story stayed with you, if it made you think of someone you haven't called, or a promise you've been putting off, or a love you've been too afraid to fully step into, maybe don't wait. Tell them. Show up. Hold the moment while you still can. If you made it all the way to the end of this story, thank you for sitting with it, for listening, for carrying Eleanor and Tom with you now. If their story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what love has asked of you, or what it has taught you. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for listening.